Now we're going to look at some examples of how to complete the report. The first example that we'll look at is a fairly typical building, a multi-unit residential building, or MURB, and this one is going to be to step 4. Then we'll look at the same building, but as if it were going to step 1 and what the differences in the energy design report are. And then the third example will be looking at a mixed-use building. So this has got some step code portions and non-step code portions, with the step code portions being to step 2.
So now you'll see on your screen a Word document on the left, which describes the MURB that we're going to be putting into the energy design report, and a mostly blank copy of the energy design report on the right. I say mostly because we've pre-populated a few cells at the bottom just to save some time. So I'm not going to read through the whole building description, but I'll give you a quick overview. It's a new multifamily building in Victoria, 27 stories, and we're given the modeled floor area and a building permit number. The number of suites, total suite area, and occupants is given, and we're told that the occupants are not considered a vulnerable population. Then we're asked to enter the information for the project as if it were required to achieve step 4, but there's a note that this is a fictitious bylaw. So we did use some information from an actual project just so that we got the proportions of energy, etc. correct, but we changed enough characteristics that this is really a fictitious building. We're given the energy results here, and the thermal demand energy, and also the overheating hours. And then we're given a mechanical system description, so electric baseboards, passive cooling only, and suite ventilation via in-suite HRVs, corridor pressurization via a central makeup air unit using electricity, and some information on domestic hot water. We're then given some envelope characteristics, and that will go into our section F near the bottom of the worksheet, along with lighting and other system characteristics. So starting out at the top here, we'll begin by entering the project address, 555 Example Street, and the stage of the project. You'll remember this is from a drop-down menu. We're told it's building permit, so I will select here building. And we're given this fictitious building permit number 12345. Now the total modeled floor area is given to us as 48,300 meters squared. And the building height is 27 stories. Now, if you can't remember the applicable version of the BC Building Code, and that includes the revision number, then you can hover over this cell and a note comes up that gives you a link at the bottom there to a page where it's got the applicable versions and the dates that they came into effect listed. But for now, I'm going to say that we're under BC 2018 Revision 2. Now for the jurisdiction, we're told that we're in Victoria, BC. So I'm going to use the drop-down menu and scroll down to Victoria here. And just remember that drop-down menu is being populated by the information on this second tab. Now the heating degree days, I also want to get that from the second tab, but it doesn't auto-populate because we actually have a few options. I'll just scroll to the top to show you what the tabular data names are here. So we've got our location, and then we're looking for heating degree days below 18 degrees Celsius, so that's going to be column G. So I'll scroll back down to the V's for Victoria, and you can see that there's actually 3 options for Victoria. Victoria, Gonzales Heights, or Mount Ptolemy. So I'll just say I'm at Mount Ptolemy is my closest location, and the heating degree days is 2,700. That will put me in climate zone 4. Of course, I'd have to choose the one that's most applicable, but we just aren't given any description here as to which one to choose, so I'm going to use that one. And the energy report submission date, we were told that this is being done in July 2020. The first time we presented this presentation, it was July 31st, 2020. So we'll just put that date in as the date. Now, Our building is to step 4. So the section B that applies to step 1 or portions of the building with an ASHRAE or NECB baseline is actually not applicable. So we're going to scroll right past it into section C. This is where we enter information for steps 2 to 4. So I start by indicating what major occupancy am I working with. And I have the option of group C, either hotel and motel or other residential. So this isn't a hotel motel, so I choose other. And my model floor area, since I just have one occupancy type, it's going to equal the total model floor area. Now you'll notice before I hit enter that at the moment the check between the totals of sections B and C matching section A is saying no, they aren't matching yet. But once I hit enter, now they do match up. So that's given me a green yes. And the step that I'm going for here is step 4. I don't have any GHGI requirements, so I don't have to choose that last option. And this box will stay gray. The fictitious bylaw that I'm given is 18107X. And we're told that the TUI and TEDI requirements for this location, heating degree days, and building type are 115. So now my total step code section, TUI and TEDI are also 115 because there's only one occupancy. And same thing, my whole building performance requirements are 115 because there is no other requirement from section B. So now I go down to section E, which is my model building performance. Now I'm going to take the results from my model and compare them with those requirements. So I start by indicating the software from a drop-down menu that's noted in the example as IESVE. And then I have to go and enter each of the energy end uses and the fuel type. And we've already put that into a table that matches the layout of this table just for ease and for time purposes. You can see we added one extra end use, the elevators here. So we're using that row to identify an additional type of energy use that wasn't in the main table. And then in the cooling and the pump section, we don't have anything shown because there's no value, for example, for cooling for this building. There's no cooling in it, no mechanical cooling. So my total annual electricity is shown here, my total gas is shown here, and my total energy, the combination of the two, is right here. We have a note here that there's no on-site renewables or purchase renewables, so I don't have to enter anything in this section. I can scroll down to the annual thermal demand energy for step code occupancies. So that's given to me here in kilowatt hours. And just remember, enter the information in kilowatt hours. It will be divided by the treated floor area for you. And the next entry is the annual thermal energy demand for the whole building. So since we just, again, have the one step code occupancy, that's just going to be equal to the value above. So I set that equal there. Now, annual cooling demand, in this building, we actually don't have cooling, so I can leave this blank or just enter 0. Now, since I have a residential project that I'm entering, I do need to look at this section. And the first several entries are for the corridor pressurization adjustment factor. So I'm asked for the number of suite doors that are pressurized. And I'm told here that there's 469 suites, so I'll put that in. The airflow for pressurization per door in liters per second per door. So that's given to me in the mechanical section as 11. And the area of the corridor is pressurized. Again, that's given to me down here in the makeup air section, 3115. The makeup air fuel type, you'll remember, is really only applicable if we have a GHGI requirement. But I can also indicate it if I so choose its electricity, as was given in the example. So that takes care of our corridor pressurization adjustment factor, and we're now seeing values showing up in here. The next two entries are for my suite level sub-metering adjustment factor. Now, just remember, those are for systems that have a central, say, hydronic heating system, and asking whether or not each suite is individually metered from a heating perspective. But since we have electric baseboard heaters in this project, this section actually doesn't apply, so we don't need to complete that. However, this last portion, is the project passively cooled and subject to overheating limits? Yes, it is. And the number of overheating hours I've been given in my results for the worst zone is 150. So at the moment, we're complying. It did note at the top of our example that our occupants are not considered a vulnerable population, so the limit of 200 applies. But I mentioned this briefly earlier, but keep in mind this section is going to change a little bit so that if you have vulnerable occupancies, you have the option of changing that limit to the 20 hours. That's also recommended. So on the right here is our summary of results. The results straight out of the model, so our energy end use here, gives us a TUI of 97 and a TEDI of 21. So if I scroll back up to the requirements section, the TUI passes, but the TEDI would not straight off the bat. However, we do have the corridor pressurization adjustment to account for. So once that's been included, then our adjusted whole building performance for compliance is complying for both the TEDI and the TUI, and that's indicated down here in this last row. And this row, it's asking, do the step code portions comply with the TEDI requirements? Well, yes, it also does for the step code portion because, again, this is a step code only building. So section F, you'll recall, is where we need to put in information, some key characteristics describing the building. So we're going to start with our envelope section, and we're given the modeled above ground vertical or facade surface area is 25981 meters squared. And the window to wall ratio is given to us as 41%. And so it's calculating the VFAR and the window to floor area ratio for us here. Now the modeled infiltration rate, this is given to us as 0.2 liters per second per meter squared of vertical facade. And that's per the City of Vancouver modeling guidelines, because this project is still in the design stage, so we're still entering target or design information. Now we're told that for this project, the testing target will be 1.3 liters per second per meter squared at 75 pascals, and that's calculated based off this modeled rate and the appropriate building geometry. Now the envelope effective R values are given to me down here. So I'm going for an R31 imperial, that's my walls. So since this is asking for a metric value, I can just put the calculation in there. It'll calculate the metric value for me, and there's an imperial calculation on the right, so it does a little bit of a check for me that I've got the right value I was looking for. And I can do the same thing for the roof, R35 imperial. And the glazing is given to me as U value of 1.2, and that's a metric value with a solar heat gain coefficient of 0.35. Now the floor edge psi value, those are calculated for us in this example. Of course, this is going to take a little bit more work for you to pull out of the model, but since you will have had to do thermal bridging calculations for a step code model, they should already be done. So it's really just pulling that information from the appropriate place. Next, we're asked for the average suite occupancy density. So I'm going to scroll up again to the top where we're given our occupancy of 1186. And the suite area is given here, just over 36,000 meters squared. So I can do that calculation in the report again with those values. And similarly for the suite ventilation rate, I can also take that value, this total ventilation rate for all suites, and divide that by the suite area that we had at the top here. The average HRV effectiveness, the note reminds us to use the SRE, and the SRE is given to us here as 75%. The average lighting power density, or LPD, is given to us in this last section as 3.9 watts per meter squared. That's fairly standard number to be reported. And we're told that the low flow fixtures in the building lead to savings of 37% over code. So 37%, but there's no drain heat water recovery or drain hot water recovery. So that's 0. Now this last bit, we use the drop-down menus to indicate what plant, suite, and heating and cooling systems we have. So since we have electric baseboards in this building, we'll actually just choose none for the plant. And in the suite, we'll notice this is electric baseboards. And I might even include a note along these lines to say, oh, and we also have in-suite HRVs. You don't have to do that, but that's just an option to kind of complete the picture of what is being used in this building. From a cooling perspective, well, we have none. So we just enter that just to show that we didn't accidentally leave it blank. And from domestic hot water, it describes we have a 95% efficient condensing boiler. So I'm going to say dedicated gas, and we could say something like central boiler at 95%. Again, this is just voluntary, but it just rounds out the picture a little bit more. And so if you find that none of the drop-down menus really suit your project type, you can just use those notes to explain what you've got. And finally, at the end, I've added my contact information. And just a note, I mentioned before how if you're trying to dig into the formulas a little bit more, you can unprotect the workbook. And there's no password. So if you wanted to, say, unhide the tables to take a look at what the options are, you could do that. However, we do recommend that at the end you protect the sheet again. You can just leave it with no password, but that will just help avoid accidentally changing any of the formulas. So now we're going to take the form that we've previously filled out for the MURB to step 4 and just make the changes as if the project is now going for step 1. So the description that we've got here is on the left. It's basically, for simplicity, we kept all the characteristics the same, except for we've added in some baseline annual energy use, which we'll see in just a moment. So first of all, what I'll start by doing is deleting out the section the information in section C, because that applied to steps 2 to 4. So that's no longer relevant to our building. Instead, we want to put that information up here in section B. So I start by, again, identifying the major occupancy, which is group C, other residential. I add the associated modeled floor area and the performance requirement, which in this case is going to be step 1. I'll put in my fictitious bylaw again, although there's no % there. Let's delete that out. And now what I have to do is enter the baseline energy, which is what my step 1 is going to be compared against. Just remember, for step 1, you have to do an NECB Part 8 model with the City of Vancouver modeling guidelines. And you just have to show that your proposed building's energy consumption, so that's section E, is less than the reference building or baseline building energy consumption. So that's what we're putting into section B right now. So we're given the baseline annual electricity usage in our example, as well as the natural gas energy usage. We're also given the baseline annual thermal demand energy, although that's actually not required for the step 1 building, because that's used to calculate the TEDI, and we don't actually need to look at the TEDI and TUI targets. Those are being calculated for us anyway. However, like I said, the only requirement here is that this total energy usage for baseline is greater than the total energy usage for our proposed building. So the 6450 megawatt hours is greater than the 4698 megawatt hours, and that is indeed the case. So in this case, what would likely happen is if we were designing for step 1 instead of step 4, this would all change, but I'm not going to change that just for the purposes of this example. I still have the modeling guidelines apply, so I still need to make sure that I'm meeting my overheating requirements. However, the suite pressurization adjustment no longer applies because that's only for the TEDI and the TUI targets. So again, that's not relevant since we're just looking at total energy. However, I can still see at the bottom here, is my building complying with the requirements? Yes, and it's really just this one that matters. It's the total energy. Again, it's looking at this total energy for my proposed case and saying that, yes, that is lower than my total energy for my baseline case, so I am passing this example. Again, most likely a lot of our input parameters would also change if we were switching from a step 4 to step 1 building, but we're not going to go through that for the purposes of this example. Our third example is for a mixed-use building. So it's described again here on the left in the Word document. And in brief, it's a 10-story building that will consist of office space, retail, and a low-hazard industrial space. So since the office and retail both fall under the STEP code, they're required to meet step 2 by this fictitious bylaw. The TEDI and TUI requirements are listed for each of those occupancy spaces here. Now the industrial space is going to need to provide a baseline per the Vancouver Modeling Guidelines version 2. And in the exercise, we're given the baseline energy model results, the electricity and natural gas, as well as the thermal energy demand. The energy results for the whole building are provided here, along with the annual thermal energy demand just for the step code portions, as well as for the whole building. And the annual cooling demand is also given. So you can see we haven't provided all the information here to fill out the entire report. Just for time's sake, we're just going to focus on the energy requirement and results section. However, I am going to provide the total modeled floor area in section A, just because that needs to be filled out in order to get some of the information, some of the yes, no, pass, fail information. So I'll just put that in up there to start out with. So for section B, this is where we're going to enter our baseline information for our non-step code portions. So in this case, we have a low hazard industrial occupancy. So I'll select that from the drop-down menu. And it's 250 meters squared. Now our performance requirement, because it needs to meet the requirements of the Vancouver Modeling Guidelines, it could use either ASHRAE 90.1 or NECB. We haven't indicated that in the project, but I'll just assume for now that we were using NECB there. And the bylaw that we're using is this fictitious one that we've noted here. Now the baseline energy model performance, we're getting electricity usage given as 34,000 kilowatt hours. Natural gas is 5,000. We don't have any district or other energy use, but the thermal energy demand is 13,750. And so as we populate these, we can see that they're used to calculate the baseline equivalent 2E requirement and TEDI for our project. We then go through and complete the step code section. So we'll start out with the office, identify the major occupancy, the floor area, the step. I'll copy over the bylaw, and then the TUI and TEDI that we've been asked to provide, that's been provided for us here. And again, of course, that relates to our heating degree days for our location and the building type. Do the same for retail. Sorry, that was 500, not 250. Also step 2, we'll do the same bylaw there, however, different TUI requirement because it's a different occupancy type. So now in the bottom of each section, we've got our non-step code, TUI TEDI requirements, our blended one for the step code occupancies, and then our blended for the whole building, which is of course accounting for both section B and C, and accounting for them weighted by area, by the model floor area. And we can see that yes, the subsection model floor areas do match up with the total one that we provided at the start. Now in section E, we start by indicating the software that was given to us as Energy Plus. And then we'll copy over this information from our end use. Again, we already populated this to indicate that the energy consumption and the fuel types, and we did that in line with the kind of set values with the addition of elevators down here. So that gives us our total energy usage, which is going to give us our total TUI performance for our building. We don't have any renewables that we're using, so we'll skip down through that section. But we do still need to provide the TEDI information. So the thermal energy demand for the portions of the building with TEDI targets is 127,000 kilowatt hours. And for the whole building, so both step code and non-step code portions, is 139. And now this building does have cooling, so we're given the annual cooling demand for the building in kilowatt hours is 50,000. Now, since we have no residential portion of the building, we don't need to complete this section. And also because our building is mechanically cooled and not passively cooled, we don't have to complete the overheating limits. So that's actually it for the energy portions of the building. And we can see that the results of our building show that yes, the 106 and 26 are lower than the requirements of 135 and 31. So we're passing from that standpoint. And also the step code portions of the building are passing with just that TEDI alone. So that's making sure that the non-step code, it's excluding the non-step code portion of the building. So that's saying that this TEDI here of 25 is also less than the step code requirement of 30. So we are complying with that requirement as well.